please take it away.
Hey, thank you very much, and thanks for having me, guys. This has been a really impressive event, actually. Right, the UK sound, we've got only 45 minutes to sum up an almost impossibly complex web of things. It's a deeply vague topic, but as some of you might know, I wrote a book called Bass, Mids, Tops, which was a history of UK sound system culture, which is more or less focused on the Caribbean influence on UK sound. So it's 25 interviews with people from the 70s through to the present day on how dub, more or less, came into the UK, how it then influenced warehouse parties, acid house, rave, jungle, garage, grime, dubstep, all of the things that we sort of consider the UK sound. So, that's why these guys have got me to moderate this panel. But obviously, Britishness in music is not just sound system based. There's a lot to it. So we've got a nice mixture of people here who each have their own contributions. And I think the simplest way to start is to let them introduce themselves. I was going to say introduce each other. That would really start it messy. Introduce themselves. So if we can go from the end.
Yeah.
And if you can just say who you are and, hell, what you do.
Yeah, I'm No Nation, and I'm a Bristol-based DJ producer. Recently, I started promotion as well. Recently, I started a promotion called Border Control. Quick plug. Yeah, that's me.
I'm Aidan, also make music as Jabru. Released on various labels, Scream's label, Tom and Joe Muggs' label, K7, various things, and I'm a studio designer and mastering engineer, more than a musician these days. Build studios, just done Ronnie Sizes, Jokers, Sunpinkers, Jump Supernova, bits and pieces.
My name's Marley, also known as Medis. I'm a DJ, used to be a promoter, and I work with Saffron Records, a female, non-binary led label, as a radio broadcast tutor.
Hi, I'm Boris, known as Borai. I write and produce music, have done for the last 20 so years, based out of Bristol. I've had releases on varying labels. The two notable things I do is I work with a collective called Club Glow. We've had some success recently, and then also the most recent thing that anyone knows is a track that I had signed by a major label, yay, called Make Me, and that's been my biggest thing, really. Most people tend to know me for that.
Now, let's go back along in reverse order, and let's get to the nub of what we're talking about. What's British about your sound?
What is British about my sound? I think it comes from influences. I'm Bristol-based, and I grew up in Bristol. And to me, Bristol music was something I came across really early. Bristol was very good at shouting about itself. When I grew up in the kind of mid to late 90s was when I really just, I was like 12, 13, 96. And so for me, it was like drum and bass. Bristol was like the second home of drum and bass. I heard about all these legends and got to shop in the record shops that they shop. So for me, my focus really has always been UK music. I was influenced by a lot of what was on the ground, and the genres that I got into really were UK genres: drum and bass, jungle, garage, breakbeat, hardcore, and that's the thing, So for me, it's my influences, I think, is what makes me a UK sound.
Marley.
I guess for a bit of context, I grew up with my adolescence in like 2010. I grew up north, where like bassline is very prevalent still to this day. Big up Leeds. And yeah, I guess I grew up like mixing bassline and grime together, being like, oh my god, this is so sick. I'm such a genius. I've just always been attracted to like grimy, bassy sounds, and I didn't really realise until moving to Bristol that I had a UK sound, I guess, because that's how people describe my sound. But I'd actually weirdly say I'm quite influenced by, like, my daily listening is very American orientated, and but then when I'm playing music or like club orientate, I don't know how it's kind of translated, but I know that day to day I listen to like trap music and American, like Memphis rap and stuff like that, and I kind of try and translate that energy with the same kind of UK artists. So yeah.
Cool. I mean, you began in UK hip hop, but in Devon,
a long time
right?
ago. Yeah, the home of UK hip hop. So long time making hip hop. Just grown up on American hip hop, and then various, the underpinning of what sort of evolved into grime, but grime very much sort of stopped a new line in the sand, but it's bass music, isn't it? That's the UK sound, isn't it? It's that sub kick in the wherever you want to kick. And that's the thread I want running through my music. Whatever happens, it's just got to have that punch and weight to it. It's about bass weight. So whether it's hip hop, I make house music, breaks, whatever, set tempo at random. I don't care what sort of music I'm making. It's just got to have that weight to it, which comes from sound system culture, doesn't it? So that's to me what UK sound is. It's that UK bass weight from the melting pot of everything that's brought into this country for the better.
Cool.
Do you know what? It's a funny question because my brand, being like an extension of my personality, is called No Nation. So I would like to think that, or at least my brand, my music is somewhat rebellious towards like a system of like overcategorization, overclassification. But I definitely would say or claim Britishness in one thing that the UK scene or UK society has done very well is mishmash so many different cultures. And while my influence might not always be British or from the UK, I definitely perceive them, absorb them from a British perspective, in the same way that, I don't know, artists in the UK have done for the last, 40 years. So while, a lot of the sounds that I might use, they might be, American, Asian, African, the way that I fit them together is definitely inspired by this, like, way we tend to absorb multiculturalism in this country.
Yeah, I think what you said as well just made me think, like, I grew up in London, and like, I think what is pivotal to being in the UK is that we are a mishmash of like loads of different cultures, and I think that's what makes the UK what it is, because we're not afraid to kind of like draw a bit of that, draw a bit of this, whereas like, I mean, no discredit to other countries and cultures, but like they all have a bit more of a homogeneous, is that the word? Homogeneous sound, whereas I think like we're so individualistic here, and to celebrate like everyone's individualism, and in that there's a kind of like freedom to explore all different sounds, and that is what makes it UK.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you can't talk about how that happened without talking about the history of colonialism and why we ended up there. I mean, there are other countries that do this. I was in Paris last weekend with your colleague Lizzie, in fact, doing a panel there, and France has its own fusions that come from the big African populations and the big Arabic populations in the cities there, and so on. So obviously we have, in particular, Caribbean, kind of slightly more subtle influence from South Asia, but it's there. Obviously we had huge Bhangra stuff and so on, which impacted on bass music and jungle and everything. But what I'm interested in from what all of you said is how that's led us to adapt American culture, because one of the things that I've realised recently from just my research and the books the work I've done is how lovers rock was a really emblematic British sound, because lovers rock came from the UK, not from Jamaica. It was because of the influence of smooth UK soul, and it was UK Caribbean sound systems playing smooth soul. Have any of you got any thoughts about like how the UK adopts American music?
I think from my own, just my little network of people I know, I think sometimes it's a kind of thing of like, not we want to do it better, but like you can see usually when scenes kick off in America, well, from a British perspective, it seems to like blow up. Loads of people are going crazy. So you're kind of sat over here like, oh well, like how can we kind of like replicate that and do that in our own kind of way? I think it's just a kind of, in my view, a kind of desire just to kind of do it, but in your own way, and just with them being our like closest neighbour in like culture, I guess you could say. It just, I don't know. I think like artists just have that. Like I know that I do. If I latch on a scene that's in America, I'm kind of like, oh, but I want to see how I can like do that in my own kind of like way. But yeah, that'd be my hypothesis.
Yeah, well, from having made UK hip-hop when I started making music in, I don't know, 95, 96, I was 15, 16 years old. And UK, there was literally there was like London Posse, Demon Boys, there was a few people, they were really using their own sound and their own voices and not rapping in American accents, and that was the important thing, that they were taking possession and making it their own thing. And I think that's what the UK does is really well, is we can borrow from other things but then put our own stamp on it and really give it our identity, and if anything, throw it back at them and make it better, do you know what I mean? But that's my opinion, bit of British arrogance in there, but I think that's the important thing, is we can go and borrow stuff and put our own twist on it and give it our own stamp. But because that was at that time, there was in UK pop you'd get cussed out if you rap with an American accent, you'd get laughed out of town. And then UK pop kind of turned its nose up at grime when Dizzy's at Wiley first turned up, and Dizzy, UK pop was sort of like, oh, this doesn't rapping properly. And look who's had the last laugh. It's, Grime's kicked the fuck out of UK hip hop, quite rightly so. But and it's so more uniquely because UK hip hop was always trying to ape the American stuff and be its own, like it's in its own voice, but it still wanted boom bap beats and wanted to be very much that American sound, whereas grime went, fuck that, we want to do our own sound. We're not even interested in what they sound like. We're going to take it and run with it in a totally different direction. We're going to rap the same word at the end of every bar, fuck you, who cares? So, and that's the UK sound as far as I'm concerned. It's about putting your own stamp on it and twisting it and taking it and running with it.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of what I was going to say. I think I've certainly seen a history of, I don't know whether or not it's because we're an island, because we're separated, that when we get something, we feel enough distance from something to have our own go at it. Certainly with America, it's across the way, so it's not like anyone's going to, like, tell you off, oh, you can't do that. So we'll, of course, and there's been a big history of it. I mean, I've grown up with the whole UK hip-hop. I mean, I remember where UK hip-hop was massive. Bristol was a real hip-hop town. It really was. And then grime started to arrive and dubstep arrived, and then 5 years later, it was like, what happened to the hip-hop? Like, literally, what happened? There's no one. There's like 2 people left. And the kids... it was like the next generation of kids didn't get interested in hip-hop, they get interested in grime. And so they then started to lead with that, and the hip-hop dropped off. But I think there's this distance, I think, from being in the UK away from other scenes, and this history of having seen other people do it, you feel like you can. It's not like it's like this off thing. I can listen to something and say, I could put my kind of turn on it. And like what you were saying about how UK is very good at taking a genre or a style of music, putting their own stamp on it, and then throwing it back again. And I always used to hear back in the UK hip-hop days, it was really difficult because Americans never wanted to listen to hip-hop in a UK accent.
So to flipping that back again, we've done it again with dubstep, where the Americans are now taking dubstep back again and fucked it up on the other side.
Yeah, that was it, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and again, I was involved in that. I was deep into the dubstep thing, and it was really, for me at the time, in the early 2000s, dubstep was it's like drum and bass was in 1996. It was open. There were these different, you could do pretty much anything, and as long as it was at 140 and had a slightly offy kind of beat, it was dubstep, or it was before it had a name even. And then as things start to all genres, it's like the boundaries start to come in, and the formula starts to get solidified, and then the new people coming to the genre start to listen to only that genre. And then I think that's when they start to what I call eat themselves, where they're only referencing their own stuff that's not referencing anything else. And the early days of genres is always really interesting to me because of how wide the inspirations are. And maybe that's just me because I listen to lots of music and stuff outside of what I'm making that I like to be able to bring it in. But that's what I loved about drum and bass, was that you could have a jazzy one, you could have a dark step, you could have a tech step one, but it was all part of this thing. And then as slowly and surely it started to solidify into just a kick and a snare and a bass. And the same with dubstep, it all went half time, and suddenly all the breakbeats just disappeared out of it. And that was what was really interesting to me in the early days of dubstep. It was like the break step stuff that was it wasn't breakbeat, it wasn't garage, it was somewhere in between. But yeah, I think Britain definitely has there's a culture of taking stuff and putting our own spin on it. So I think people grow up with that and they enjoy that and want to continue it.
Music, I think, around the world has provided a cathartic release. That's a big component of what evolves music, what causes it, what necessitates it, what necessitates a scene in a place is the requirement for people to have this cathartic release to deal with, I don't know, life's tragedy or life's destitution. And America and the UK are just, as Molly was saying, we're linked. There's the struggle of American artists. I have a certain empathy for them, maybe mainly because we speak a common language, but our societies are very similar. So I imagine when hip-hop came over here, it was just immediately recognizable what those artists were doing. So I think it was only natural that you're going to want to support and then absorb that. And obviously, when it comes over here, it's not going to be hip-hop in the same way that they made it. It's going to be whatever we need to feel good in that moment, or to feel that release in that moment. So, yeah, and maybe it's a language. Maybe the language thing's probably got a lot to do with it. But there's empathy across the Atlantic. There's a lot of empathy.
Yeah, and the USA was had the cultural hegemony, as they say. It was like the culturally dominant force for the English-speaking world. So naturally, that's going to have happened. I remember speaking to George from Nightmares on Wax, and he always, I was talking about whether 1988 Acid House Revolution was like his magic moment. He was like, no, for him it was 1983 when he saw Buffalo Girls, Malcolm McLaren, on Top of the Pops, and saw breakdancing and graffiti and everything for the first time. And he said literally he went into school the next day and every black kid there was spinning on their heads. I mean, that was his bit of an overstatement perhaps. But, it was like that was the key moment, more than even Rapper's Delight, because people actually saw the breakdancing and they didn't just hear the music. It wasn't just lyrics and beats. It was the whole sense of, here is something physical I could do with my body. And naturally that's going to be different if you're doing it in Leeds or Swindon than it is if you're doing it in the Bronx. So clearly that influence. And likewise, say with UK Garage, people were already listening to Masters at Work and Todd Terry and Todd Edwards and stuff. But for a bunch of South Londoners to start putting dancehall style spin backs and having an MC chatting on top of it and stuff was going to change that, and that became something very British. there's something that I always think of as British, which is the phrase I keep coming back to is the psychedelic industrial continuum, which is yeah. So over decades, since the 70s, so Cabaret Voltaire started making experimental electronic music in, working class kids in Sheffield started messing around with tape loops and stuff, and Throbbing Gristle, this kind of weird, trippy industrial sound. And then that came through to the house generation, through post-punk and through to house. I mean, Aidan,
so I missed out a bit of growing up in Devon and free parties and DIY, etc., etc. Was a whole other aspect of UK sound.
Exactly. I mean, I'm wearing a T-shirt of the Happy Land compilation, which was experimental British electronica of the 90s, which accidentally got mispressed onto some Taylor Swift vinyl, but that's another story. Hence the powder pink of the T-shirt. But I mean, that kind of trippiness, which came from ultimately hippies and crusties, fed into what it is to be a British sound. I mean, Aidan, you went to free parties in the West Country, right?
Yeah, one or two. I can't remember.
But sonically,
I was told I was like, yeah. And I mean, I suppose that sound actually came down from up north again, didn't it? Before it got down to Devon, because DIY crews that's all where they Birmingham,
Nottingham.
Yeah. I mean, I was just there by association at that point, really, just off made in the field. But yeah, it's. I don't know that's a kind of bit. There's always been a severance line there, though. I don't know where that continues, where that sound's actually still got its roots, where that is now.
But it came into UK bass via, Cabaret Voltaire were there at the beginning of Warp Records.
No, I mean more say the DIY stuff where it's now, where the link is now between what's going on now and that side of the UK sound.
I mean, if any of
seems
the
to have
rest
been
of
a
you
timeline stop almost in it. That were like, whereas that how UK house music hasn't taken much influence from that side of UK house that was going on then. There is very much as well. Obviously, I like stopping they were doing that.
I differ on that actually, because a lot of UK funky and Afro house, bizarrely, and I don't know if Andy Compton's here because I've seen him milling around, but there's a lot of deep house producers from the UK who became revered in South Africa. All who came from the DIY scene. So Phil Asher, Charles Webster, Andy, who cut his teeth in the free party scene. They ended up playing loads in South Africa to audiences who then created their own house sounds, which is now feeding back to the UK as Amapianos. But I mean, have any of the rest of you got any kind of experience of that kind of, I guess, alternative, you might say, electronica scene?
Well, I mean, I don't know if you ever heard of Wordy Gig. So that's my auntie's event. They've been running that since, I think it's in the 80s.
87 or something?
Yeah. They are like the ultimate hippies. My auntie is a fairy, my uncle is a wizard. It's true fact. But yeah, I mean, I grew up, I worked there since I was 13. I know it's hard to believe, but I have worked there since I was 13 doing lights and kind of growing up around that. And it's kind of funny because that was very much my identity growing up. And then for me to get into like grime and like dubstep and like probably the darkest areas of like UK music, coming from like the most trippy, fairy, like psychedelic kind of thing, I kind of think I still saw a similarity in the kind of space that's like made through the music. In that, I think, and yeah, again, a celebration of drawing in, and a lot of cultures, like my auntie and uncle would always say that they don't do psytrance events, they do music events that incorporate the world, and that they want to play music that draws influences from all parts of the world, because they're trying to they're trying to cater to like all people of the world. And in that kind of philosophy, I think I kind of felt that same energy from dubstep and grime, in that like it's drawing on from reggae, house, and the music itself, quite instrumental based, gives you the space to kind of feel. I don't know, I can't really put a word on what I'm trying to explain, but yeah, I think like the whole trippy or like hippie movement kind of encouraged like the experimentation and the kind of silliness almost. And I think right now, because you said about the free rave scene, I kind of see people incorporating that now again to try and be silly again, because I think UK music has gone through a period of like becoming like each scene being in its scene and being really serious, and like if it's not 140, it's not dubstep and all that kind of energy. And I think people are getting a bit sick of that now. So the free party scene is always, well, from my understanding, has always been about just having it out, no matter what song it is, Venga Boys, whatever it is, like you're having fun. So I think a lot of DJs, producers are kind of just sick of like trying to stick to this regime and like just bringing that influence in.
I think that's so important, and there's going to be a lot of very serious electronic heads here who are not going to be convinced by playing Venga Boys at the rave. But in the 90s we had
saying Venga Boys,
Sesame Street.
Badger. There's a guy from Bristol called Badger who's making big bass, like he's done a Venga Boys remix that Scream's been playing. Everyone's been playing it. It's fucking horrible, but it's like it absolutely smashes it. He's sick. He's smashing it, and that actually is a continuation of that. Because I was thinking, because for me, I thought the timeline almost stops from that DIY sort of free party scene, but it's not. Balter and that, I suppose, are still keeping it going. That's still. I'm just old now. I just think I was old. There's still kids doing drugs in fields. It's all right.
Yeah, I mean, and there's Sherelle as well, and like I think a lot of like of the big international artists, they're really like pushing that scene. Again, I guess it helps, especially with the UK scene being quite neat, like the free party scene being quite niche. As a notable DJ, when you're playing like a completely unknown mashup of what people are, oh, what? That is so crazy. What is that? So it is kind of almost a token of like, oh, I know about something you don't, kind of thing.
Yeah.
One of my biggest rave moments, party moments from this year was at the Crown, and I was at a party called Nightcore for Total Sluts. It's a donk and hardstyle rave. And the DJ dropped a hardstyle remix of Robbie Williams' Angels. And it hit me in my soul, like, deeply. And, do you know, like, my first... I used to make hip-hop. When I first started producing, 2017, I was making hip-hop because I really wanted to be Jay Dilla, yeah? So I bought a native instruments machine and started cutting up soul music. That's what I knew, like, I grew up with this hip-hop, so especially like West Coast, like sort of really airy soul beats. And that was pretty much what my impression of what music was. And then I went to Distant Planet, which is a party, it happens in London, it's happened in Bristol a couple of times. Simon Husey and Louise Plus One, it's their promotion. And they played mostly 92, 93, hardcore, techno, can get crazy into Gabba. I've been a couple of times where it's descended to that. But I remember at that party being in front of the speakers, and I never heard anything like that in my life. Like, it blew my mind in terms of like what I thought music was. Then I started producing rave music because one tune that I always think about when I or at least when if we're going to talk about this topic, one tune that comes to mind is Trip to the Moon, Asen, Production House, yeah, it's like a classic, yeah. There's a moment in, I think, part 2 where it goes into a breakdown and there's not even a note playing. It's just the speakers are just doing this weird stereo effect. Like if we played it now, it's just like an effect that happens between two speakers in stereo, but it works. And then the break comes, and then the bass comes, and I never thought of making music that was just like supposed to be experienced, you know what I mean, rather than just listened to or sung along to. And yeah, I've always found that nature of experimentation in the UK, I've always found very inspiring, especially because these artists that started doing that, for me, or at least the lineage of music that I like to think that I was part of, which came from hardcore, they were doing it with nothing, pretty much, like fucking calculators and Octamed, whatever that is. You know what I mean? So, and like the spirit of experimentation being born in these communities that do it with so little, I've always found really inspiring, and one thing I've really loved about learning more about UK sound.
I've always had a dream of, that's one of the many back burner projects I keep going in the back of my head, of getting Arts Council money to go round looking in like lockups and people's mums' lofts and stuff to find the old Commodore Amigas and Atari STs and the floppy disks that went with them, to find all those unfinished tunes, because you know there's a whole generation of crazy hardcore.
Yeah, you have to big up DJ Harmony, bringing out a lot of the tunes that from the tape packs that never came out, and then now they all.
I can't remember what it is. Yeah, DJ Harmony's dubplate YouTube, SoundCloud is insane.
Yes,
like so many.
Yes, I came across that one before I knew it was him, and quite a lot of people did. We're just like, it's just full of dub plates that never came out.
Yeah.
You know, and it's all like 1 minute clips of them as well. It's like, so everyone's like, ah.
But between, like, you really hit on something between, like, what you said about experimentation and foolishness. And, like, people talk about the British sense of humour, the British sense of the absurd, right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, we're in Bristol. You know, one of the big venues in Bristol is the Thekla. Who started the Thekla? Vivian Stanshall. You know, the ultimate, and it started as a cabaret club.
Like, I mean, for people who don't know who Vivian Stanshall was, please Google Vivian Stanshall and the Bonzo Dog Doodah band.
Yes, to me they're kind of
deep history there.
Deep history, and they're one. I don't know, but to me he seems like one of the last of those real British eccentrics, bohemian eccentric, along with the big ginger moustache and everything that came with it. And so I think Bristol certainly, but the UK has this kind of absurd, you know, kind of caricatures and silliness to it that I think people do. Yeah, I mean, one of the ways that people define themselves is by not being that. Certainly when I was when I was growing up in the drum and bass scene, it was all about being unsilly. It was like, you couldn't be silly. That was like the opposite. You had to be deadly serious about absolutely everything. And you think that's the way it is until suddenly you come across something, a whole scene of people just playing crazy tunes or whatever, and you realize that, like, oh no, this is great.
Do you know what's funny about those scenes and those tunes though, is that quick brag though, quickly, on the topic of silliness, I managed to get a Bangface ticket. I don't know if anyone was on the server yesterday, but it was crazy. And one thing I love about that party is that it don't take itself seriously, and it's almost a competition of who can take themselves the least serious, and then it gets a bit serious about taking yourself not serious. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like, who can be the least serious here? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there is a point, and I think a fine line is ideally in the middle somewhere, where we can be serious if we want to be, and we can be silly if we want to be too.
Yeah, I mean, I've
fuck about properly. If you're going to fuck about properly.
That is a nice summation of good British attitude. I mean, I've ended up at too many parties of music industry people who are jaded and therefore play stuff that is crap for the sake of it. And that's different. That's different to the foolishness of the rave, isn't it? It's like...
very much so.
It's cokehead foolishness.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's not joy and silliness, and we're all enjoying this. It's how I can kind of outdo you.
It's cynical.
Yeah.
But the thing about the foolishness of the rave is that it kind of leads to that special. Paul Gilroy, the cultural theorist, who's very much about the Caribbean influence. He has a constant theme of conviviality, about people breaking bread together, and it's something that the UK through the 20th century was lacking. Because we had a very formal society, we had world wars. There was a lot of rigidity to society, and he talks about how Caribbean culture coming in brings this multi-generational thing. It's like, people. There's the whole thing of the blues party where the whole family is there, the sound system comes out, all the rest of it, and that's what my generation suddenly experienced through rave, was the fact that at 4 a.m. you're sitting like in the back room of some fucking railway arch or on a hill or whatever with half a dozen people who you've never met in your life, who you would never have run into ever, of various sexualities, classes, races, whatever, and you're having a really silly conversation with them.
Yeah, right. And it just turns into, it's the classic whole, who are you, where are you from, what you on? And then it's like, oh wow, no way, and you're enjoying the revelry of being there and being this thing. And yes, the conversation's just endless of craziness, but still, that's very much part of what Raven culture is, like you say. Yeah, you're just discovering this like 4 a.m. chatting bollocks to each other. Like, isn't that actually? It's actually quite life affirming when you come out the other end and realise, like, yeah, actually, that was wicked.
I'm fascinated to know what that was like as a youngster with whirligig people.
I mean,
did you just take it? Did it just kind of?
I think I was actually I was very much of an observer. Like my auntie and uncle really like on my breaks, they'd be like, go out, go dance, go get involved, and I'd be like, I don't know, but because I'd look at their faces, obviously 80% of them on some kind of hallucinogenic, and I'd be like, I don't know if they look like they want to, like, I don't know. I was just very much an observer. But I mean, I loved my job. I really got stuck into that. So I was only really until like I was 16. We started doing Whirly Fair, the festival. And was it when I was 16? Or maybe I was 15 actually. And I did my first bit of MD at the festival, thinking that my auntie wouldn't find out. Obviously, she did. But it was probably the best experience. Like, it was so safe. Everyone there is just so lovely. It was a really good environment for my first experience. And it definitely, from that point, I was like, oh, okay, I get what you guys are doing here. I get it. But the first time I've actually been to a whirly gig that, like, not working was a couple months ago. So I've never actually, growing up, I was very much an observer. Kind of, I'm not gonna lie, gave me a lot of like what not to do when on drugs, but definitely gave me a sense of openness and understanding and patience for all people in humanity. Like, the amount of patience that my auntie had for the crew and the people that came was unbelievable, and it really taught me to kind of do that in all aspects of life.
We kind of looked back at the roots of everything that's fed into UK sounds. In the 21st century, it's all become quite mishmashed. We no longer have like, okay, here's the new sound revolution. This is jungle. Everything's new now.
Yeah.
How has that been for all of you?
I mean, I think straight away, I grew up on the cusp of that. So towards I'm kind of 40 now. So again, I was like late 90s into the 2000s and watch as it goes 2000s. And I've really noticed the death of the tribe. Like, it used to be, certainly when I experienced it, was like you got into wherever it is that you were growing up, that was your choice of what you got into. if there was a rave scene there, then maybe you could partake in it. But there were a lot of places where there weren't. It was just rock or whatever. And you had to kind of, at school, you kind of picked your tribe. And then you were in your tribe, and then that was what was going on. And the scenes were very much built out of, you're either this or you're that. You can't be, when I was at school, it was like, you're a jitter or you're a raver. You're into Nirvana or you're into like drum and bass. You can't be into both of them. And no one really straddled the lines between them. It was very much dedicated. And I think the internet, the internet arrived and blew everything out, because suddenly you could see what was going on in the other parts of the world. And suddenly you could find a tribe of people, your tribe of people that weren't the people that you grew up with, and that was all you had until you went to university, and then maybe suddenly you discovered something else. And I think certainly the tribalness of only being able to get into what is physically within the area that you grew up in is definitely something that's like less now.
I think that's true, but at the same time, the best of British has always come from going, fuck that, we can mix Nirvana and drum and bass, so fuck them. And that's where the best of the British music has come from people going, break the rules, we can do whatever, and just make sure it's got a solid bottom end.
I would say, as I think the youngest on here, that I kind of like, I hear of so many people speaking about this tribe energy, and like I really envy that. Like I feel like just as I was getting into grime and dubstep, I felt it, and then it kind of just dissipated, and I was like, oh, I don't know. And I guess as a musician in the scene, it's quite hard to make your stamp, because then it's like you've got to be a personality, or you've got to post memes, or I don't know, you've got to have something about you that's extra, other than I just appreciate this wider scene of music. So I don't know. I feel like I as someone grown up kind of with it stripped away.
Having said that, the people that I think we've come a long way since Napster and iPods and stuff suddenly gave you this splurge of everything all at once, and everyone kind of going, there is no like one thing that you can pick from. What seems to have emerged is the idea of someone who's a guide, who can map out interesting territory. You mentioned Sherelle. She's like a perfect emblematic DJ for the modern age, that she goes through this kind of, using one tempo, brings together loads of historical threads. Scream's new album is a really good example of someone who's come up through dubstep and stuff, but through the club mainstream as well, and is able to join things together. Boko, who are like my favourite DJs in the world at the moment, they bring together all these global influences, like Brazilian grime, and I'm not going to try and pronounce the genre from South Africa that requires difficult pronunciation, but you know what I'm saying. And even older people like Mary Ann Hobbs, the late Andrew Weatherall, Giles Peterson kind of join the dots in a way that doesn't require tribal belonging or genre specificity. Where that leaves the British character, who knows?
I don't know. I do feel like the result of that, though, is that, like, I don't know, the way I see it, especially, like, I played, like, a freshers event the other week, and, like, I just feel like kids these days, just, like, they don't really know what they want or, like, what's going on, and it's kind of hard. I feel that energy of, like, I'm like, okay, I've got to teach you what's going on here, but it's hard. I think it's just harder to develop that kind of tribe when there is no tribe.
Yeah, I get the argument for the tribe and the lack thereof, and what implications that has, maybe be negative in a lot of ways, but at the same time, it's like we live in this, we've got so much accessibility to music, there's like discovery that can be made constantly, and that's the nature of UK music from the beginning, was all about discovering music and doing it our way. So if it's going to continue to evolve, and it has been, and that's one thing as an artist I've enjoyed, is feeling like I'm part of something that is going somewhere. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people that are forever trying to recreate the 94 sound, which is, if that's your station, fair enough. But me personally and my brand, what excites me is looking at what is happening next. And for me to know what is happening next, I need to see all of what is happening now and that only just adds to that process. You know what I mean? So with kids going to parties and not knowing what they like, yeah, they can be manipulated and tricked into going to shit parties. But then there's an opportunity as a promoter, as a DJ, to then open up eyes, innit? You know what I mean? Because I thought I knew what I liked a few years back, and then someone took me to another party, and I was like, oh shit, no, actually.
And then you're dancing to Robbie Williams' Dog.
Yeah, and then eventually I'm like, yeah, you know what I mean? But I would never have, unless someone was willing to show me that, I would never have discovered it necessarily by myself. If I just grown up as like, oh, I'm a hip hopper, and I mean that's what I did grow up as, in that fanship, yeah. That could have just been me forever, you know what I mean? But
it's the algorithm. The algorithm points things to what you think you want, or it thinks it knows you want. So it's much more difficult to find stuff outside of what you originally got into.
Yeah, I was saying this earlier, but I think all that means we are due a new UK sound before too long, because it's
a fresh one,
like
new.
I mean, obviously the options are getting narrower in between the spots, but there's some kiddie's going to come up with something fucking mental.
I have a prediction. My prediction is there's going to be more hard house.
I'm
already pushing it. I'm starting it.
I'm ready
But
for
it's a 20-year back. I've been playing it out, and I've had kids run up to me like, "Wow, what is this music? What's it called? We call it fast breakbeat." It's called hard
my
house.
13-year-old likes it. He's into like bro step and bassline, and now he hears hard house. He likes it.
Yeah.
Do we have time for any questions? Because I have not kept an eye on the time, but. Oh, yeah, okay. I'm really sorry about that. I was not watching the time properly. I think this is like an inspirational wind-up, though, because, you know, the potential, the sense that fusions are like bubbling is still very much there. Is there a question in the audience? Okay. There is a microphone.
Okay. We've obviously got politically, things are ever changing. We had a Home Secretary the other week say that she thought that multiculturalism had failed. Obviously, there's a lot of talk on this panel about multiculturalism and the mishmash nature of culture and how that feeds into music. She's probably just playing to a right-wing tabloid gallery that the government thinks stands in for the British people. So how serious she is about those comments, I don't know. But is there a case to be said that in terms of music culture, we could be doing a lot more to push back on that narrative? And if so, how do we do it?
I think music's just independent of that. It just gets on and does its thing. It doesn't give a fuck what politicians are saying. There literally couldn't be. It's independent of that. It just music's the example of that's what our politicians should be looking towards for how to behave and how we can all get on. It's a separate thing. I don't see it
as long as you've still got that unexpected group of people sitting around a table or around a campfire or whatever at 4 a.m.
I think through the pushback is through events and parties. I think that is one positive we can take from this, like lack of tribe mentality. I think we almost need less of that, because for certain people in this country, there's not many spaces where they can feel totally comfortable to be themselves. So that's one superpower that we all have, I think, as musicians, as promoters, people that work in the scene, is that we create new spaces for people to be able to just be themselves, you know what I mean? So essentially that's what this politician doesn't want, you know what I mean? So I think if there has to be any pushback, or if we can create pushback, and I think we can do significant damage to that sort of ideology, is through making spaces more open, more like we was talking about free parties. You meet people that you'd never cross paths with in your real life, and I think we need more we need more of that. It builds empathy. It reduces ignorance.
Exactly that. More chances to meet in real life, to see each other, to notice that you are no different from the person stood next to you, to meet someone out of your world, to realise, because that's actually what it takes. All the talk and all the rhetoric just means that people have this idea of things until, there's the classic, like, oh, I absolutely hate people. Oh no, but what about your mate? Oh well, no, that's my mate Dave. He's different. It's like, well, how is he different? Well, it's because you know him. And so once you get to meet people, these boundaries get broken down. So yeah, more spaces for more people.
I'll give you one example of a specific party where I've noticed like the mixing of people be like beneficial for people's growth. Yeah. So this party, Distant Planet, generally has had quite an older crowd, but more recently with like this whole I know people say Jungle's going through a golden period, a golden age. Yeah. Or Jungle's back again. People have been saying that. But younger people now, apparently, have been getting into breaks, students, and I don't know, people just at the age of where they're starting to rave. So the crowd at Distant Planet it's mixed now. In terms of ages, it's like people that have been raving since the early 90s and people that have just started raving. And one thing I noticed is that the youngers, they're always like maybe a bit apprehensive. Because when you grow up, you're taught to fit a certain character, to portray a certain character, rather than just be your authentic self. Maybe you're worried about what your authentic self is. But then I see the youngers and the olders in the rave mixing, and then you kind of see them loosen up a little bit. You know what I mean? And they realize, oh, right, actually, these people ain't judging me like that. I can actually just enjoy myself and put my hands in the air and scream and shout, and it's fine. You know what I mean? And it's safe. So we're already pushing back. You know what I mean? We need more of that.
It's not even about seeing someone and going actually we're the same. It's about saying we're different, but this place is better for the fact that we are. I've always found that the best party is always the most diverse.
Yeah, I'd agree with you.
The most fun.
Music's always been pushing back and proving that wrong, basically. It's never done any different, and I don't think it'll ever do any different. Music's always been setting the example. That's different.
Good. I think we've set the world to rights. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, there's a million more things to say about this, but really, thank you to these guys. It has been educational and inspirational. So, big round of applause, please.